Welcome, my dear listeners, to another haunting chapter of Echoes of the Dark. It's Violet Nocturne here, stepping out of your deepest nightmares and into your screen. Tonight, I hold the tale of a secret that sleeps beneath moss-covered trees and whispering winds. This is the story of the Moss Hollow. Our tale begins in an unremarkable little town named Morning Grove. Lying at the town's edge is a forest few dare to enter. It's not fenced off, nor marked dangerous by the authorities. And yet, somehow, everyone knows better than to wander into Moss Hollow, especially at night. This is where we meet Eleanor. Eleanor, an aspiring photographer, insatiably curious with a knack for finding beauty in abandoned places. That night, after hearing half-whispered warnings in the town pub, Eleanor decided to ignore every caution and venture into Moss Hollow. After all, legends rarely deter intrepid souls with something to prove. Eleanor's footsteps were quiet as she entered the woods. The moonlight weaved through the canopy, painting her path with silvery streaks. The air was cold but clear, and the forest silent. It was the perfect setting for eerie inspiration. She clicked the shutter of her camera. Once, twice, and then a third time. At first, there was nothing peculiar, just the occasional rustle of leaves or chirp of a cricket. But then, at the edge of her lens, she saw something odd. A movement. A shadow larger than it should have been, ducking behind the trees. She turned toward it cautiously, camera ready. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple. Her heart quickened. "Is someone there?" Eleanor called out, her voice wavering slightly. Of course, no reply came. Still, her curiosity got the better of her. She took a hesitant step toward where the shadow had loomed. Then another. The silence around her felt unnerving now, too absolute. It was as if even the trees stopped breathing. She pressed on until she stumbled upon something that made her blood run cold. A tree stood before her, but its bark seemed alive. Dark rivulets like veins pulsated across its surface, oozing a viscous green sap down its trunk. Tiny insects swarmed the sap in unnatural numbers, their hums sounding almost manic. Still, Eleanor raised her camera. Click. And then, another shadow darted out of view. Breathing heavily, Eleanor tripped back to the dirt trail she had ventured off from. For the first time that night, logic urged her to retreat, but defiance burned under her skin. She wasn't about to leave Moss Hollow without uncovering its secret. No, not yet. As she walked further, strange noises began emanating from the depths of the dark forest. Distorted voices, dissonant whimpers that sounded neither animal nor human. Her instincts screamed to leave, yet she stayed. Her feet moved on their own. Or perhaps they were being guided. Then she reached the hollow, a clearing nestled deep within the woods, a circular space barren of grass. The air there was different, heavy with an undefinable dread. And there, in the center of the clearing, stood the altar-like stump of a tree, surrounded by jagged stones placed evenly like teeth. At its base, objects sat in a peculiar arrangement. Old jewelry, faded photographs, even a stuffed teddy bear, all covered in that same viscous green sap. They looked like offerings. But to what? Eleanor thought. The longer she stared, the deeper a sense of unease buried itself in her chest. Then the voices returned, clearer this time. They snarled Eleanor's name, stretched out in inhuman cadence. She gasped, spinning around, but the clearing was empty. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When she glanced back at the altar, her heart froze. A figure now loomed behind the stump. It was grotesque, its body gnarled and twisted like the roots of a dying tree. A crown of antlers extended wide from its head, draped in moss and cobwebs. Hollow black sockets stared out where its eyes should have been, and a chilling smile spread from ear to ear, or the semblance of where ears once were. Eleanor dropped her camera instinctively and ran. She ran as fast as her feet would carry her, the whispers turning into guttural growls, the growls blossoming into a horrific cacophony echoing within the hollow. Her breath grew ragged. Her heart pounded like a wild drum. She could feel it following her, gaining on her. No matter how fast she ran, its presence loomed closer. Finally, Eleanor broke out of the thicket and collapsed onto the main road. She glanced back at the tree line, expecting her pursuer to burst forth, but there was nothing. Just stillness. At first, relief washed over her. She was safe, or so she thought. But when she looked down, she noticed her trembling hands were coated in that sickly green sap. It had seeped into her skin, her pores. It stung like venom. Eleanor thought she escaped Moss Hollow. She thought it was over. But dear listener, legends never end so easily, do they? From that night on, Eleanor heard whispers in her ears, even when alone. Her body began rejecting sunlight, her once vivid photographs distorted into grotesque images she didn't recognize. And her nights? Well, her nights were no longer her own. Because you see, Moss Hollow had marked her. And forest bargains, they say, always demand a price. As you go to sleep tonight, remember this. If you ever find yourself venturing into the unknown, and the forest whispers your name, turn around, run, and for your soul's sake, don't look back. Thank you for joining me, my brave little moths. This has been another macabre melody from Echoes of the Dark. Until next time, sleep lightly, but not too lightly.